What has coaching done, throughout this 7 or so year process for your practice?
Honestly, it's like completely changed my life on a lot of different levels. What I've seen with growth of the business, applying a lot of the methods that you've taught both in podcasts and the courses and your ebooks, and being a true student to, like, I don't know, I feel like if you really want this, like, you do have to really want this. I think if you're kind of halfway in, it's going to be very challenging for you to see the results. And for me, my personality is more driven like that. So I think the coaching also helped me organize myself and pace myself on how I needed to do it and be very intentional with what it is that I wanted to do with my practice, and who my patient avatar is also really helped. I think that the coaching also really helped me learn with staff management, which I don't know if anyone's really touched on that with some of the information that you've given, but with being able to manage different personalities, understanding a bit more on how to direct employees to basically be self-marketers themselves. And I think the coaching has also transferred into like how it's done with like my family and personal life. Like I have more time for travels. I have more time for spending with family, or at some point when I choose to have a family, like that kind of thing. The coaching goes beyond just the business. It goes into like really how to organize my life because there's a lot of aspects that you can apply on a personal side that I thought was very interesting. And again, a lot of the resources that I truly do think people should be utilizing that you have has been very instrumental in my life.
Hello and welcome back. As always, thank you so much for joining me. This episode is an interview with Jonathan Parr of Parr PT in Austin, Houston, and even a satellite clinic in Colorado. And this is a really near and dear one to my heart because Jonathan was one of the first physical therapists for my own children. And he actually was assigned to their case through the home health firm. And about 4 months into it, as he was starting to work on his own practice in Austin, he started looking for coaching and advice. And he was like, "Oh my God, I'm treating this guy's kids." So he brought it up with me, and we kind of worked out something where he continued to treat my kids, on a cash pay basis, but in trade for my coaching. And that was, I guess, back in 2018, 2019. And now he has 2 full-time therapists in the Austin area, 2 full-time therapists in the Houston area. He has his own caseload as well, obviously administrative staff. So he's got quite a business going at this point. Over the last 7 years has grown it. And this year, in the midst of doing a lot of travel himself, will likely hit the 7-figure revenue mark for the first time in his business. So he's done awesome things, and you'll hear exactly how he did it and all the different things that he learned along the way. Some really great actionable advice that I think will be applicable to any type of practice out there. And we really talk him, and you'll hear a great deal of his success has certainly been associated with being in an underserved niche. Not that it's necessary. Obviously, my own practice is general outpatient ortho. We've done just fine. But as you've probably heard through the years of listening, when I have coaching clients or people on like now that have developed themselves as really the expert, or their group as the experts in a certain niche, it can make things a whole lot easier in the cash pay world especially. So you'll hear all about that. And if there's any questions that you have that I didn't ask, you can ask them of Jonathan yourself if you want to join us in our mastermind coaching program. So this coming Tuesday, after we publish this episode, we will have a featured Q&A every month with one of our mastermind members who's had a lot of success. And so you can come and ask him any questions that you have, and you can get 50% off your first month in the group by using the promo code, or the coupon code. It says promo code. When you go to the checkout cart, you'll scroll down and click the little link that says have a promo code, and then you'll enter December 50. That'll take 50% off your first month, and then you'll have access to me, the entire group. All of the resources that you've been hearing about from this podcast are all going to be at your fingertips. So go to drjaredcarter.com/mastermind, and then when you click the button to sign up, you'll use that promo code. So again, as always, I deeply appreciate you joining, coming back over and over again. We have so many listeners that have been listening in and learning for years and years. If you'd like to take it to the next level and get my direct guidance to your specific questions, and in this case, ask Jonathan anything that you would like to, please do join us. And with that said, here is Jonathan Parr. Welcome, Jonathan. Glad we can make this happen between world travels. Uh,
No, it's an honor to be on here. It's something that I've always looked forward to.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely, man. So, for those who are not familiar with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into private practice, and we'll kind of take it from there.
yeah, so my name is Jonathan Parr. I'm a physical therapist at Parr PT. And I got into private practice because my sister, when I was younger, had basically a neurological condition that not too many people really understood. And seeing that process of her going through therapy and that part of where people were like, didn't fully understand the condition, but were sending her to places that weren't necessarily specific to her. And so once I started to see that, and I was young, I was only 16 years old, seeing that made me want to do something a little bit more specific. So when I got out of PT school, I was in two different facilities and didn't necessarily agree with how they were treating patients from the approach of whether they had two people at the same time. Maybe you could only do 10 minutes of one-on-one. So there's a lot of things that I started to see. I was like, man, that's not why I got into PT. I wanted to really work one-on-one. And so when I started to think about what it is that I wanted to do, that's the direction that I chose. At some point, I want to get all the skills that I need to get myself to the level that I could potentially see patients on their own and do one-on-one care. And I think just to have better outcomes. And so I think that's what really drove me to get into private practice was to do things in a way that I thought would be more beneficial. And also that I had a bit more autonomy to have, to try new things. I think most people in certain facilities, there's certain criteria, certain guidelines that you have to follow that may or may not specifically address the issues that the patient is having. So it makes it a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, something I probably asked a long time ago, but obviously you have really developed the niche of EDS and POTS and those related syndromes. But obviously, we met as you were the pediatric therapist for my children.
Mhm.
What had you go into pediatrics, before starting your practice?
Yeah, so my big focus was purely neuro. And this is
Yeah.
even before the EDS thing. 'Cause what my sister had is neurological. So I was going all in on neuro, especially my first year. Then once I got into an outpatient facility, I still saw that population, but then I saw EDS and POTS. And I was like, okay, well, I've never heard of this. Let me see what, I can do here. And I saw that a lot of it was neurological. And
Mm.
so most of the settings that I've been into have been more neurological based, even though the condition doesn't really have a huge correlation with that condition or with that specific area of PT. So actually, when I got to Austin, when I met you, which I didn't even know who you actually were until like what 4 months after seeing your kids,
Mhm.
that I wanted to get into something that would develop my skills more. And I knew that I had such a heavy neuro background and peds is very heavy on neuro that I wanted to develop those skills. So over the course of what I think in December, I hit 16 years as a PTI. I always wanted to put my foot in a lot of different areas. So I had a better idea of really like how to treat a patient. So by the time I got to peds really opened up my eyes because there's a lot of developmental milestones. There's a lot of slower progressions you have to do in addition to the things that I did in the past with the American Ninja Warrior and all that stuff, like understanding a lot of biomechanical work because I was a strength coach before I got into PT school. So then I take the fitness biomechanical component and apply that with the peds and a brain injury. And then that's actually what helped me really ground myself to be really good at EDS because there's a lot of principles that are used in each of those areas that's required to treat this condition that at the time, and I still think at this moment, there's not a lot of physical therapists doing for this population.
Yeah. And you mentioned American Ninja Warrior. Was that when you were going through that, was that all you were already a physical therapist, or did any of that precede PT school?
I was. That's actually when I started to branch out to do my private practice. And so at the time when I was working with the facility, I was trying to implement sort of like obstacle course related,
Mhm.
therapeutic interventions for this neurological population, especially spinal cord injury. Actually, when that kind of took off for me from American Ninja Warrior, I was actually already starting to practice in Houston. So I was in a gym. So I just was training people in the gym. I wasn't doing any manual work. It was pure, strength training, balance training, like your whole typical neuro setting. So during that year, while competing, I was actually still learning about private practice because in my case, I actually wasn't seeing people for an hour. I was seeing people for 2 hours. So I was doing 2 hour intensive therapy, but all I needed was four patients a day to fill up my 8 hour schedule.
Mhm.
So for me, I didn't have to really dive too much into the marketing because I had enough time that was filling up, but I was learning more about the private practice during the time that I was doing American Ninja Warrior, which they also helped me because obviously what they put on TV helped generate more,
Right. Okay.
interest and understanding of what I was doing.
So when you were in the finals and stuff, and they're talking about you, they were saying you have a private practice
Correct.
in the Houston
Mhm.
area. Okay. What year was that? Or years?
2015. Well, it was 2013 to 2019, I believe. But the year that was a bit more focused when I branched up for private practice was 2015. And that's when they showed me more on the show. And that kind of helped generate a lot more interest
You
in what
were
I was doing.
and just I can't remember the details. Like you had made to the finals for a number of years in a row, or how did it?
No, so I was on the show for 6 years in a row, made it to the finals. The year actually the one person won for the first time. So that was a cool experience. But that year was probably one of the most intensive years for that show as it started to pick up
Mhm.
and really do what it's doing today.
Okay, and it's
Yeah.
still a really
Yeah,
popular. That's exciting,
yeah.
and so some exposure there. But I'd like to kind of now paint the picture for the listeners of the progression and the story of your practice. So you started in was it 2015 or right before that
2015.
in the Houston area? Yeah.
Houston area.
And then when did you come to Austin and how this will be kind of a nice little side story is that you had established a practice and then moved to another city while maintaining location in Houston 3 4 hours away. So when did you move to Austin and how did that go with maintaining what you had already built in Houston?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that when I started in 2015 or a little bit before then, all my contacts were in Houston. So everything that I did regarding ES Neuro, that was purely in Houston. At the time, I realized I just wanted to be in Austin. I wanted to be closer to family. I was like, Austin would be a great spot. I don't think they have a lot of resources. This would be a great place. The thing is, I didn't have contacts whatsoever, none. So what I had to do is I actually kind of temporarily closed my
Mm,
Houston location because it was just me. I didn't have employees or anything. When I got here is when I started to do home health, and that's actually when I got into Pete's
mhm.
because I was trying to hold on and kind of figure myself out, networking but I didn't really do a lot of that already. So ultimately, when it came down to it, I was going to go to business. Actually, this is a backstory. I don't think you actually know. When I got here, the intention was to open up like a Ninja Warrior meets a PT clinic
Hmm.
with another person that I used to compete with on the show. Over a year of planning and looking for all the stuff, we had investors that essentially were kind of backing or funding what we were going to do. But at the time when it came down to it, it just wasn't a good fit for me once it came down to like signing the contract. And I was like, you know what? That's fine. So I kind of lost a year there.
Hmm.
And then with some of my experience with working with some of the Olympic snowboarders out in Colorado, that got me another connection. So that facility that I was, I guess, involved with, they were offering to franchise a location down here. And so I met with them again, a whole process of a year, me going back and forth. And that also fell through. It didn't really pan out. So I'm like, geez, so I just did 2 years of two different types of or potential partnerships that didn't work out. So at that time, I decided I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to try it by myself. So that window of when I moved to Austin in 2016, I didn't really get anything going until closer to 2018, where I thought about, okay, now it's time for me to get into the Facebook groups or these support groups to let them know I'm here to see, is it even a possibility for me to open a practice? Because Austin was booming and I was scared that I wasn't gonna be able to afford any rent, in order to start the practice, right? So
Oh,
once I got into the
like office
groups,
rent, office.
correct, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. No, 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 I had my
Yeah.
personal side card
Yeah.
because I was already working basically PRN to help. And so that was a big thing that helped as well is that once I got my first patient in Austin, I ended up working with that one person for probably close to 2 months. And I think after that, that started to get word. And
It's an EDS
within
patient.
the EDS, a very specific EDS and POTS.
Okay.
Shout out to Kirsten because she's still a close patient friend of mine.
Nice.
And because of that, really expanded because the thing is, with the world of EDS and POTS, it's a community that's underserved from on both medical, PT, all that. So when they find someone that is doing well, I mean, it spreads like wildfire. So I was blessed that after those 2 months, I started to get a patient here, a patient there, and then I joined like a BNI networking group just to see if I could network. I had never networked in my entire life, so that actually got me to meet someone who had a location where I'm at now, and I've been there for 7 years to have an office space, and I could just pay per person. So
Through the
then I
BNI,
transferred
through
those, yeah, exactly.
networking. Okay.
So so then I ended up transferring those 3 or 4 patients that I had. Once I actually had a solid facility, that's when within 4 months I was completely full. But I was very focused on that specific group of giving free presentations, I'll do whatever it was within that community. And then I became full and I was like, okay, well, that's awesome. But kind of circling back to Houston, how I got
Yeah.
Houston back was that I had a friend of mine who used to work with me at a facility where we saw that condition before I went on my own that had moved back to Houston. And then he had asked me, hey, if there's any work that you need done, I can help you out. We already had a lot of patients that were driving from Houston to come see me anyway. So I was like, hey, why don't you just take care of them? I'm thinking it's like a little side hustle. He
Mhm.
gets his, I get a little bit. Well, within 4 months, he's also completely full. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is a lot bigger than what I thought it was going to be. And then it just kind of flourished from there to where we're at now, which is what, two PTs in Houston, two PTs in Austin, plus myself, plus an admin and a VA.
Okay.
That's 7 years worth of,
Yeah.
of
And,
work.
and so would you, I mean, I know I worked with you on some of that and also just kind of the growth side of it beyond being solo in the online and stuff,
Mhm.
which we can talk about in a moment. But it sounds like a great deal of it had to do with really just word of mouth within the community. Were there, maybe we could dig in, this coming Tuesday when we're doing your featured Q&A in my mastermind. Why don't we plan on digging into the specific step-by-step things that for anyone that's looking to get established within a community or a patient population, a niche, what exactly you did, how did you get the doors to open, what kind of presentations, all that kind of stuff. So we'll dig in there,
Mhm.
but kind of more 10,000-foot view, what were the main things, whether online or in person, that really you feel like got things going, got the word spread, and got you guys full so quickly?
I think that the community part was a big thing for me. It was doing a lot of free presentations within groups. I mean, I would drive to Houston for a group of like 18 people
Mhm.
and just talk about why PT is beneficial for EDS or even what it is that I do. Because at the time, they didn't even know that you could really do PT for EDS.
Mhm.
But I honestly, I think that it's just those Facebook groups helped so much. I mean, because people were so desperate to find someone. And there's like, hey, we know this guy in Austin or we know this guy in Houston that has a good track record of working with these patients. Because I had already developed my following in Houston. I just didn't have any in Austin. So the people in Houston were already aware who I was. In
Right.
Austin, they had no clue. So I think the community part of getting involved within that support group, I think is what really, to this day, has been the most valuable thing for me as far as my practice is concerned.
Okay. Good. So presentations, Q&A, being a
Hmm.
resource in person and digitally, I'm guessing with
Hmm.
the Facebook groups.
Correct.
What kind of Facebook group interactions were, I mean, were you actively answering questions or was it more just them saying, hey, go see Jonathan in Austin?
It was just, hey, go see Jonathan. And I think the thing is too is as you probably already know, I with me, everything was a bit more personal. So I had pretty good relationships with the people that I was, treating. So I knew their kids or I treated. That's the thing too, since it's a connective tissue disorder, it's genetic. I'm not just treating one person, I'm treating probably a whole family. So
Yeah.
that also helped with more of the outreach and the spreading of my name was they knew me personally, they knew who I was as a therapist, they knew my track record, they knew that I was I think there was a lot of authenticity that helped them understand who I was. But I mean, you imagine this huge population with medical trauma, with saying that it's all in your head and all these things, and all of a sudden they find someone who actually gets it. I think that was a switch for them to be able to like, okay, this person's already had experience. I'm going to go straight to him. And to this day, that's what's actually been working is that the credibility part and also the connection that I have with the community.
Yeah. A number of my, coaching clients, they'll get into a niche and they're just a hyper expert in it. And then one of the challenges they find themselves in is staffing and finding someone who either already has the skill set or is coachable and can, in a reasonable amount of time, be onboarded, trained in that specific niche such that they can really provide a high level result like you are, right?
Mhm.
And then I see it even like one of my coaching clients is an EDS expert up in the Northeast. And she's like, it took forever to find that first person. And they're on a 2 month waiting list. And it's just like there's a lot of power being in that niche, but then it's got its positives and negatives. And one of the hard things that I've seen is, and even in like, I'm not even in a tight niche right now, it's hard to find high level manual therapists.
Mhm.
We're
Mhm.
if anyone's listening to this and wants to move to Austin and just, see patients one on one and not have to deal with the business stuff, let me deal with that. Come on down. But yeah, so tell us a little bit about your experience. Now you have, you say two or three other therapists and yourself, or two
So I have four outside of myself. I have four therapists. So I
Right.
have two in Austin, two in Houston.
So yeah, tell us about that kind of, give us that topic of like if you're in a tight niche where there's not a whole lot of people with that level of expertise, how do you scale up?
Yeah, I would say fortunately, the first person that I hired, which is the guy that helped me in Houston, already had the experience. So I went about a year and a half of not really having to deal with it. I think between kind of filling in the gaps of areas that maybe he just didn't have a ton of specialty. So it was a bit easier for me on that end. But when I got my first therapist, which was a new grad, at that point, understanding one, I would say even fundamentally as PTs, when PTs get out of school, and I say this in the most respectful way, they don't know a lot because don't have a ton of experience, right? Like there's a lot of things that we learn in school from an orthopedic course, like, everything is general, but I didn't realize how much of a gap there was from what I do with patients, specific to this condition and what's taught right out of school. And so there was a huge thing, but my challenge was when I was interviewing, I had people that were maybe 5 years in, but they were already kind of, I don't want to say set in their ways, but they had a way that they like to do it, but that way doesn't work with my patients. So then I had to pick, do I want someone that maybe already has a bit of skill that can manage themselves and grow into it, but maybe I run into the obstacle of them not wanting to do it the way that I need them to do it because I've already shown that I can do it with that condition. But on the other side, I have someone who doesn't know necessarily about the condition, so I have to almost double the amount of training. But once I get them to where they're at, then I know they can follow out, doing the processes that we have. So I chose new grad. To this day, I have not hired anyone with more than a year of experience
Wow. Okay.
because of that, that helped. And one, I had to see, are they coachable? And usually transparent about that in the beginning. It's like, hey, we have a system. It's not like a protocol, but we have a system of the way that we view this condition. This is the approach that we take. Are you open enough to use the skills that you have now and also apply the ones that we have? And if they're like, no, I want to, whatever, then that's fine. But once we got them in and they start to see the difference in how they treat, that was even more motivating for them because they're fresh out of school. So they're excited. They're ready to learn. They're ready to do all this stuff. And I found that for me was a lot easier, but the time it took was a much longer. Like it was at least like an 8 month of pure investment of like one-on-one training, setting up systems for them to study things on their own. Like it was a lot of, and I was learning that. So it wasn't perfect the first time, the second time, the third time that I had an employee, but I'm grateful enough now that in the position where I'm at with my employees, aside from one, all my employees have lasted more than 2 years, and I've only had essentially one at 2 years. The rest was like three. I have two of them that are four, so more than half the practice has been built on that. But I think for those who are looking to see what avenue they go through, I have found it's been more beneficial to invest a lot of my time into that one person, assuming that that person's a good fit for the company. And I found that after those 8 months, they're pretty much smooth sailing, and it's just me kind of checking in, making sure they're okay. But all my have been new grads except for one that was like a year out.
Wow. So
Mhm.
I mean, this is a cool example of new grads really working well in a
Mhm.
cash-based practice.
Mhm.
But clearly, you're putting in a ton of time and training and investment in them. So, what does that look like now? You said it wasn't perfect, but you've gotten a
Mhm.
system down. That 8 months, I mean, are we talking you're with them in the clinic almost every day, or how does it work?
Yeah. So because I didn't necessarily have systems, I didn't have any formal, I was just kind of training at will. Like I would have topics and I'm like, okay, let's work on myofascial release for shoulder complex chest. Like I just had it off the top of my head. I never wrote it down. That was my problem. So now actually this last year, what I ended up doing is I'm like, I'm going to make an actual structured system of when they come in, what's the easiest thing that I've seen people learn quicker and into the more advanced. So I was trying to give them like a 6 month window. Well, when I wrote it, it was way too much. I'm like, okay, what if I condense it to three? And now we have it to where, again, trial and error over the last 7 years. So I highly recommend people start this earlier, especially if they're starting to train. It's like if you're recording something or if you're training, record it so you don't have to re-record it and keep doing it over and over. And it took me a lot longer to do that. So once I was able to actually formally write it down, my latest employee who I just hired, was probably the fastest person that I've trained, and it was 3 months where she was independent. So that included me in the clinic. There were times where I was just having her take notes and maybe doing some, if I'm doing a plan of care, for an example, if she does an evaluation, I want to write her plan of care that she would do, and I'm going to write mine. And then at lunch, we'll meet up and figure out what it looks like. So I think taking time for the differential diagnosis and the processing was more beneficial than the manual. Anyone can learn manual. You just show them where it's at, a few reps, you know exactly what you're touching, which is why I focus more on the manual side quicker so could be becoming more independent with patient care. And then I can just shadow them and help them with the Q&A part of differential diagnosis and why. And so after doing that, that made a huge impact on the speed of which my employees were ready and how efficient they were. So by basically 3 month window, it went from maybe 25% them helping with the treatment, then it went 50% and all with patient consent, right? And maybe month two was 50% of them doing co-treating. And by month three, they're doing like 75, 80, or basically almost 100%. And then I would make sure that if they were treating independently, it was like a less complex case so that I know like whatever she's going to do is going to be perfectly fine for that person.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned over the course of time is being able to gradually let them come in versus just feeding them to the wolves who can be extremely overwhelming, especially for a new grad with a condition that even people with 10, 15 years don't understand, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I even really heard about it in PT
Mm.
school. I can't, it was so long ago.
I didn't at all.
So now just a little bit on running a business that has, locations in different cities.
Mhm.
Or even in like a big city where you're just not, I mean, we have clients, coaching students that are mobile and they've got therapists all over the place. So they're not seeing them in the clinic all the time. So either of those scenarios is like when you're not face to face and really hands on with everyone that is working for you, what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome and how have you done that?
Yeah, I would say, especially with the Houston, that was probably my trickiest thing because the guy that I originally had hired, he already had all the skills, so I didn't really have to go back and forth. During that time, we were expanding, and then when we hired the new grad, I had him, hey, focus on these specific trains with her. So I would come every other week, maybe a day out of the week just to help train, and we would do a full train. I'd block off no patients. And from a business standpoint, I was technically losing
Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
but I saw the investment of, okay, and I'm a big numbers person, so I take that day with that's valued and I multiply by however many sessions I'm going to do with her and see how long is it going to take me to get that back. And for me, that was important to see because I know a lot of people will say, well, I have to get paid. There's no way we can lose a day. Well, when you plan it out, it works. You just have to be able to actually plan out like financially what you're losing in this quarter or 2 quarters and what you're going to get back in the other quarters. Because if you're only thinking about what you're losing that day, you're kind of missing the value of how long that person can be with the company. And for now, that person's hitting 4 years. So for me, I was every other week for honestly, I was probably there for almost 4 months, which I know is this was early on, but it's what I needed to do to get her to where she needed to be, and it worked.
Yeah.
And so after that, that's essentially what it was for there for probably for 2 years. So I didn't have to redo that. What ended up happening is I ended up having someone for Austin, and that person was on site, so it was much easier. So I basically alternated my time. I would invest X amount of time, let's say 4 months into this person. Now that person's steady, I'm going to give myself at least 6 months before I even think about hiring. Then I got into another person. I invested that time. So I think with Houston at the time, it was easier because I knew what was going on because I already knew what his experience was. Now, after he left after about 3 years, then it was trickier. But at that point, my therapist was already so well developed that she was the one now taking over the reins
Hmm.
of everything. And so when I hired someone else, she was playing the role that he did. So basically involving my staff, but also involving incentives. Like if she's going to take on a bigger role, I'm going to have to incentivize her to be like, hey, this is your role. I need you to help me with this person. And again, the other therapist that I hired last year, I did the same thing. I was there for 4 months and that person's exactly where they need to be. But I would say when it's long distance, I would have liked to have my systems of training better because I think if I would have had already something laid out, from a training standpoint, I don't think I would have needed to have gone there so much. I would have had something in place that my other therapist could have carried over on a daily basis and maybe just me come every 6 weeks. So that's something that I learned. It's just everything's about systems. And I know that you mentioned it a lot with what you do. If you have your system set up, it makes life easier. It's just like a lot of times people jump into it without having the system set up and it takes them 2 or 3 times as long to get it done. And it actually causes more stress later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And You mentioned incentivizing. I think this would go even if you didn't have locations all over the place. But what did that look like when you're, having your established therapist incentivized to whatever degree you can share? Like, how are you doing that to get them to step up and take on training and these kind of things?
Well, I think the biggest thing was one reduction of hours, right? So, what can I do to reduce some of your patient care hours so you can allow? Because most people, especially from what I've seen for people at school, they're eager to teach as well. They want to basically play like older sister or older brother, big brother kind of thing, right? So, when you see those qualities in the therapist, I want to also tap into that to where they get fulfilled in that sense of feeling like they can also help with the company, right? I feel like a bigger part of the company. So, when I offered it to her, I just mentioned like, hey, I'll reduce your hours here. You'll have some time at home, but also time to help train. And so I think that for especially for someone who's on year three, that wasn't even an opportunity that I would have even gotten 3 years out of school, right? So from the financial gain and also with helping them feel more part of the company, I think also helped with her wanting and being eager to carry out. And
Mm.
that there's a lot of different ways to incentivize financially, maybe less patient care, which is really what I focus on with a lot of my employees is what are ways to really incentivize them to be successful at what they do, but also to help me with things that I don't necessarily have the time for that'll benefit everyone.
Right on. So less patient care, but investing that time not with patients in training, essentially,
Mhm.
and still
Correct.
getting paid or, getting paid more for that time or
Yes, slightly more for that time, but then also, for an example, she's also doing marketing. We never have done marketing before for the company. So now, not only is she able to go face to face and do network, she's training. So basically acting as my director there
Mhm.
as a way for her to still, to grow in her position, but also be able to take care of the things that need to be done. So if I just had in a regular PT position, then I have to play director and then I have to do all the stuff. And so that's how I wanted to make sure I wanted to get someone that was in charge, but also knew the system well enough to carry over with minimum occurrences of mistakes.
And with so much training, not just yourself, but also, you're paying someone else to do the training, not always with a patient, so I mean, there's a big financial and time investment there. Retention is obviously, employee retention is super important. What are some of the things that you found have been a part of, really most, if not all of your employees staying on multiple years?
I would say flexibility. I tend to be pretty flexible. I think the salary coming in so let's say the average person, not including admin time, sees about 35 hours. If you take like 5 hours of admin a week of, lunch and documentation, all that. So what I initially had it was for 28 hours. And so I adjusted my numbers to an hourly basis of what we charge to help cover the time that they need, honestly, to actually rest mentally. Because what we deal with for chronic illness is a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of trauma. It's more demanding, not just because what we do is all manual, but it is very taxing emotionally, right? So I also need to consider that too, because if someone's going to be with me for a long term, I know what it takes. I've already been through working with with chronic pain population for so long. So I make sure one that I can offer them a salary that no one can, given the amount of hours that they're working. So that's one part.
Hmm.
I have, I think, close to a month of PTO.
Wow.
We take 2 weeks off at the end of the year, so they always have 2 weeks off for break that are paid, and then they have 12 days throughout the year, so it's like 20, I think, like 22 days, and then we offer unpaid time off. This is something I don't know if I've actually explained this to you that if I have a set number, let's just use 28 hours, and actually I just recently reduced it to 25 hours of patient care. I know if each person hits their 25 hours of patient care minimum, bonuses, all that stuff, and I also cover health insurance at 100%, which most places don't.
Well,
So if I'm offering close to a month's worth of PTO, I cover completely their health insurance. And then I offer unpaid time off, meaning let's say I have 25 hours and I want Thursday and Friday off, but I don't have any more PTO. If you can work that 25 hours in those 3 days, have at it. It's not going to be a problem for me. I just need that number. So what happens is that people have been doing that and found that they could even take more time. Honestly, I think my employees have probably taken almost like 2 months off a year based on stuff like that, but it hasn't affected the business. And
hmm.
I think when they know that they have the flexibility if, something happens from a family standpoint. Oh, and I also offer maternity leave at 50% for 6 weeks. So then you look at all all this that's included along with the perks of CEUs and bonuses and team building. There's a lot that's in there that because we're so small and plus because the rates are what they are, we can accommodate it. And that also, I feel like not just from a business standpoint, but from them sustaining as a therapist to perform high quality of care, I think it also shows them what their worth, that they have the break, but they also have the drive to make an impact on these patients. So I think that's why people have stayed, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I mean it sounds like a pretty incredible, you know,
Yeah.
benefit package, if you will.
Mhm.
And that, yeah, that's huge.
Mhm.
And for the listeners out there, again, we're going to have a deep dive Q&A with Jonathan. So if you've got questions that are popping up that I'm not asking, you can join us and ask him yourself. And the intro will certainly have the details on how to do that. So yeah, Jonathan, what were some of the things that you learned from? Maybe they weren't failures or setbacks necessarily,
Mhm.
maybe they were, but maybe things that you attempted, and whether it's a marketing lead gen thing or sales component or employee management, what were some of the big lessons learned that the audience kind of take and maybe avoid mistakes or put it in place in their life?
Well, I made a lot of them. So I think that, but I think they all led me to better like decisions or like understanding of the business side. Because I mean, being a PT, we're not business people. We're coming out for strictly patient care. So that transition was a bit harder, even with, reading books and whatnot. But what I found was the most challenging was I tried to do too many things at once. I wanted to get everything together, but I didn't really have everything set beforehand. Because what ended up happening is I ended up spending more time doing stuff that I could have just done in a much shorter. Like for example, some of the stuff that I got from you is like, let's make sure all the legal stuff is good. Make sure that your consent forms, make sure that you have your LLC, make sure like that is a priority really before you really start seeing patients. Because if you're taken care of on the legal side, it's going to protect you regardless of what it is that you do. But having trying to do legal, then marketing, then this, it's like sometimes it's just better just to kind of set goals of like chopping it away. That way, when you're there, it's already set. You don't have to go back and forth. So I think that's one thing that I learned that just to slow down and just get yourself a little bit more organized and make an outline of the task that you want to complete. And you'll see still at some point you wouldn't have lost as much time as you think if you just take your time. I think I also ended up trying to spend money on like people to write my blogs. There's a lot of people who are great writers, but they're not as like SEO friendly. They use keywords, but when you plug it in, it has like a poor readability, especially when you think about what's required on like WordPress and Yoast. So then I spent a lot of money on those thinking that it was gonna automatically turn into that. But when I got them, I'm like, okay, I just paid almost $1,000 for none of these blogs actually haven't been readable. So now I have to go back in and so my recommendation is before you start looking for people with marketing, maybe they're writing, maybe the social media, whatever it is, I would really like to sit down, like have someone sit down with them and really get a full understanding of what it is that they can provide and in detail. Because I feel like if they can't fully explain that in detail, then you're wasting a lot of money on services that aren't very specific to what you need. I feel like that's where I lost a lot of money from a business standpoint is I just heard you need someone who can write a blog. Boom. I'm researching Blog Finder. Check. Without even understanding the part of it that's included or that's needed for it to help like grow, readability and SEO content. And I think that was a big thing for me was getting the right person for the job, but also again, taking time. I go 0 to 100 so quick that I've learned just to pace myself on that. And then also, I think feedback. With my niche, people have opinions. I don't care about anyone else's opinion. And that's the reason why I got into it because what I do at the practice is so far out of what PT is. And this is feedback from other PTs that I have friends with and other physicians. And it's so different, but I know it works. And being confident in what you do rather than trying to cater to other people's like wants and needs from like what their desires are rather than you knowing what's going to help them. I think those are the challenges is being able to explain that too. Like, how am I going to explain by barely touching your neck, I'm resetting your nervous system? I have to have that in my head already of my 60-second pitch as to why. So, the self-marketing part is also challenging is really understanding your craft.
Very good. I would like to quickly touch on the online component. I know that over the years, and you'd mentioned just recently, starting to get patients from around the world buying your online program. So tell us a little bit of the story of how that came to be and where it's at now.
Yeah, well, it started off me making programs on a Word doc and recording the videos every single session, new videos of me saying the same exact thing for the patient. Again, something that you showed me is like once you record it, just record it. And so I ended up recording almost 400 videos the course of like 6 years. And I just kept recording the new exercises. And ultimately, what that turned into, I was like, well, why don't I try to link this instead of actually remake it, every single time I see new patients? So how that evolved was into writing it, explaining it, and then taking video, me recording the videos, putting it on a PDF, to the point that because our YouTube page was getting so popular, we started to get global outreach on specific services, especially like on my end for motion sickness, which is one of my courses.
Right.
And so when I saw that, it's like, okay, is there something that I can create that's safe, that I know that even if the person doesn't do it correctly, they're not going to get hurt, right? Because everything that I offer is wellness based.
Can I just ask
Mhm.
real quick? And that's a good point. I'll
Yeah, yeah.
pick up with the that everything is wellness, right?
Mhm.
But the I just want to make sure I was clear. So you're saying that with all of your patients over time, you were recording specific videos specific to them and then putting
Yes,
it on a
yes.
feed for them, and then but over time you were able to extract certain videos for more general
Yes.
courses, or I don't
No,
think I
no. So
understood.
what it was is I was recording, let's say I'm going to do a squat. I was recording the same video for the patient, explaining the same verbal cues, but I was doing it multiple times. So what I did is once I recorded it, I just saved it and I hyperlinked it. That way, if I gave it to him, I
Oh,
just sent
right.
him that video of the explanation.
Yeah, so
So
you
that's how it
would
happened.
you put it on YouTube and as like a public
Correct.
visible thing, and then you just
No, I had it as private. I had it private for
private?
my
Okay.
patients. Yeah.
Private.
So
Okay.
then they had their own access to it. But what it was is then I started to see, like I said, with people overseas. And I knew that with my patient population, I have to be very specific because they're more prone to injury. So I'm like, well, why didn't I record one video explaining what everyone has told me over the last 15 years, the compensations, and I'll just put all the cues in one video. Do this, don't do this. Here's the options, here's safety. And then once I had that, I was like, okay, now I feel comfortable because all the information that I could possibly tell them is in that video. So now I feel comfortable if someone overseas were to purchase it, that I know I provided all the information for them to be successful with it. And so because of that outreach globally and understanding because of my travels, they don't have resources. That's when I was like, I think I need to put this online because at least they have some sort of access to help them get going because right now they don't have anything where they're at. And then
Anybody?
it'll also help my patients because I can streamline things.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so did you eventually take things from YouTube, put it into a course format where they could pay for it? Tell us
Mhm.
about that.
So my patients have free access, right? It's part of what their initial fee whenever they come in. So they have long-term access to it so they can just log in. Whereas the people who are purchasing that aren't actual patients,
So your ongoing patients, they have access to the courses that you're
yes, yes, sorry. And the people
yeah,
outside have to purchase it, yes.
sure. Okay.
And so when they purchase it, then they have the access to it.
Okay. And right now you have a motion sickness one, but you also have stuff for EDS specifically, or
Yeah, so specifically for EDS, we have our fundamentals of foundation. It's more like injury prevention based and autonomic regulation. And then we have an actual strength training. So we divvy it up in two that we give every patient that comes in. Each course is 2 months worth of
okay.
information, but each patient can start at whatever level. It's organized from a protocol standpoint, but it's also depending on the patient. So we tell them, okay, you're advanced on that. Start at level 2 instead of level 1. So that's for our patients. Now, what we have for people outside of our facility, we have it structured to where they can start in the beginning and they can go at their own pace. So between those strength training, the fundamentals, and also the motion sickness, those are the top three courses that we have and have done well. We've sold quite a bit, and I was very surprised. I mean, our outreach has been better in Europe than it has been here, which is very, we haven't put anything in marketing into place. It's been organic searches
When you say outreach, you mean people reaching out to you for the course or
for help, for
for help?
help with
Okay.
that specific. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm motion sickness. Do you have anything? Or my kid has a concussion and, something like that.
And if the listeners wanted to check out like the info page or, the courses themselves, what are the websites for?
Yeah, so we have our main one, ParrPT, PARRPT.com, and it should be in the shop area. And then we're going to launch our Parr University, which is going to be purely our educational courses and
For
webinars and
for for,
programs
for patients?
for clients.
For
Yeah, for clients.
for
Yeah,
patients.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Which will launch probably in the new year. So those Parr University, PARR, and then
Yeah.
university.com. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's not open or ready quite yet, but the shop button at partpt.com, they can check out
Correct. Yeah. Exactly.
coursework.
They can see everything that's listed there.
Okay. Great.
Mm.
Great. Well, man, this has really been great. I'd love to kind of finish up with just talking about coaching and what role that's played in the success. I mean, you didn't really get into it. I mentioned, world travels
Mhm.
before, but you've worked your butt off and got to a point where now, things are running without as much of your input, and you've been doing a lot of traveling and fun stuff. And
Mhm.
so what has coaching done throughout this 7 or so year process for your practice?
Honestly, it's like completely changed my life on a lot of different levels. Obviously, I think what I've seen with growth of the business, applying a lot of the methods that you've taught both in podcasts and the courses and your ebooks and being a true student to like, I don't know, I feel like if you really want this, like, you do have to really want this. I think if you're kind of halfway in, it's going to be very challenging for you to see the results. And for me, my personality is more driven like that. So I think the coaching also helped me organize myself and pace myself on how I needed to do it and be very intentional with what it is that I wanted to do with my practice and who my patient avatar is also really helped.
Mhm.
I think that the coaching also really helped me learn with staff management, which I don't know if anyone's really touched on that with some of the information that you've given, but with being able to manage different personalities, understanding a bit more on how to direct employees to basically be self marketers themselves. And I think the coaching has also transferred into like how it's done with like my family and personal life. Like I have more time for travels. I have more time for spending with family, or at some point when I choose to have a family, like that kind of thing. The coaching goes beyond just the business. It goes into like really how to organize my life. Really, because there's a lot of aspects that you can apply on a personal side that I thought was very interesting. And again, a lot of the resources that I truly do think people should be utilizing that you have has been very instrumental in my life.
Awesome. Well, I'm
Mm,
glad I could be a part of the journey. It was really cool early on in our relationship. I mean, you basically were paying me for coaching by treating my kids. It was like
mm,
quite the
mm,
trade, I think. I'm
mm.
seeing them progress and, the great work you're doing with them and being able to help you guide, your practice. It really was a unique thing, and it was super beneficial on both ends, my friend. Sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
as you know. So, well, let's wrap it up there. And again, for those who are interested or have questions that we didn't answer today, please do join us. The promo code for the 50% off will be in the intro if you didn't hear it. You'll go to drjaredcarter.com/mastermind, and then you can use the promo code to join us and ask all your questions of Jonathan, of me, of the rest of the group. It's an amazing community at this point. So, thanks again, Jonathan, for everything. And
Thank you.
we'll get back together next Tuesday inside the group.
Sounds good.